All right, well, thank you for joining me today. I want to apologize for sounding a bit like a frog. I have a sore throat the past few days, so I don't normally sound like this. So, I'm sure you guys were a little curious, what the heck am I going to be talking about, right? I mean, aside from dirt and soil, but what is it really? So before I get started, I want you guys all to close your eyes. Close your eyes.
Don't run away.
I won't go anywhere.
Don't keep it for too long.
And I want you to picture yourself either as an adult or as a child. Sunny morning, dewy grass, warm breeze, and that wonderful smell, fresh cut grass, the earth, and just harness that feeling. Take your shoes off mentally, or you can do it physically, but that feeling of running around, that childlike joy that you got, and I'm sure you guys are all feeling it, right? Sticking your toes in the mud, getting your hands dirty, and right now, maybe you think, oh, mud on my toes, gross. But as a child, were you thinking that? At age 8, 5, 10, 15, whatever, right? The simple joy of running around, having dirty feet and hands and clothes, it didn't matter. And imagine if we could harness that feeling and take it through our lives. How different this world would be, how we would be to each other, to the land, to the earth, and as a society. Pretty great, right? So you guys can all open your eyes. And keep that little feeling in a box. And take it with you wherever you go. When you're feeling sad, happy, whatever. That simple joy of just having dirty hands and feet and playing and running and whatever it is. Take it with you. So, soil, right? This concept that some of us maybe know a lot about or a little bit about. And today, it doesn't matter how much you know. So we're just going to briefly touch on it. And I like to think of soil so much more. I like to call it the biogeochemical stomach of the earth. A bit of a mouthful, but if you're really trying to address what's going on, you need to think of it as this wonderful stomach, churning and working and taking things in and out and cleaning our water and supporting our lands, growing our foods. And if you think of the hydrosphere, the biosphere, the lithosphere, all these different spheres on this earth, this is where they all interact. And they all come together and create this wonderful land that we live on, walk on, and eat from. So, what is soil, you might ask? These are kind of lengthy definitions from the NRCS. And you can read them if you want, but basically, the definition of soil is a mixture of sand, silt, and clay, living and dead matter. Of course, we have air and water, and all these different things creating soil. And then we have this other concept of soil health, also known as soil quality. And what is soil quality? This one's a little bit shorter, but soil quality is defined as the continued capacity of soil to function as a vital living ecosystem that sustains plants, animals, and humans. So not only are we growing food, but we're growing our land, growing ourselves, and we're fostering this health indefinitely. We're not worried that, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, we're going to run out of land, water. We're going to be worried about salty soils and the inability to grow things. Because when we foster that soil health, that's not an issue. So, dirt, soil. Some of us use them interchangeably. Often, if you call soil dirt to a soil scientist, they will get offended. So be a little careful. So we don't mess around like that. But What is the difference? So dirt's dead. That's what you get on your shoes and you scrape it off when you walk inside. You pick it out under your nails. It's a nuisance, really. But soil, it's alive. It's full of organisms, water. It's this living, breathing, wonderful, biotic sphere interacting and making these wonderful interconnections, just the way we are all interconnected on this earth. So it's what we grow things in, right? Some of us, we have farms, we have gardens, maybe we just have a few potted plants. But the feeling of getting your hands dirty in this dark, wonderful, earthy, great medium. You know that smell, that earthy smell you get when you play in the soil? Did you know that's actually microorganisms? That's actinomycetes. Sounds really cool, but it's not just the sand, the silt, and the clay. It's actually a living, breathing organism creating that earthy, wonderful smell that I personally love, and I think a lot of us all probably share that love. So think of that. I mean, when I first started learning about this, I remember my first soils class, I was like, what? I'm learning about dirt? Okay. And just these simple facts, how things are so interconnected. It was amazing. I was mind blown. And just to think, that earthy smell is actual organisms making that. Crazy. So think of this. There are more organisms in a tablespoon of healthy soil than there are people living and dead that have ever walked this earth. We've all baked cakes before, or something of that sort. A tablespoon. That's nothing. Such a small amount. All the life being harnessed in there. It's amazing. And think of if we all felt that same amazement. How different our lands would look. How many more trees we would have, healthy crops, working together. And we wouldn't just be working this land as if it's our property to degrade and manipulate. We would be working with it and considering us all one. So, why should we care? The main question, we all think about things. So, raise your hand if you've ever heard the term climate change. Everyone in this room, am I right? How often do we hear climate change? You know, it's surrounding us all the time. We've created this term of sustainability and we've incorporated it into our lives. Now raise your hand if you've heard the term land degradation. Some of us, not all of us. And for as important as climate change may be, right next to that we have land degradation. Within the past few hundred years, we have worked our land so intensely that we don't even know if we can grow food in the next 100 years. Crazy. And we as man, we've gone through these wonderful revolutions, right? Technology, agriculture. We've been able to feed more people than ever before. And that is so wonderful. And we're facing these issues of growing populations, land degradation. A lot of areas are already seeing water scarcity, salinity of soils. Well, paying attention to this land degradation, right next to climate change, it's one of the most pressing issues we're facing, but we're not talking about it. And although climate change is this terrible, horrible thing we're talking about, it's not very graspable, We can do little things, turn our water off when we brush our teeth, turn the lights off when we leave a room, but in the grand scheme of things, I know that I, as well as probably most of you, feel that, am I really making a difference? There's so many things that we're facing, but one thing that we can face and overcome, or help at least, in the next few years, is this issue of land degradation. We talk about soil quality, but we all contribute. We all eat food, we drink water, right? And with that, there's so many things that we can do as consumers to change that. Making conscious decisions. And I could show a bunch of graphs and talk about all this doom and gloom. You guys all read the news. You know what's going on. We know that our land is in trouble. Our climate's changing, and all these different things. So let's talk about some of the different things and how we are interconnected and what we can do about it. So, land degradation and climate change, they go hand in hand. One contributes to the other, vice versa. and we are just as interconnected in all of this. And although environmental and social impacts of climate change are going to be detrimental to many, and of course, people in more, we can call it poverty areas, will be more greatly affected than some of the more developed countries, we can call it, but we're all affected by land degradation. And this is something we can deal with now. We all eat food, and it doesn't matter who you are. We all want delicious greens, clean water, and wonderful lands to live on. Soil isn't just soil, right? We don't just grow food. It serves as a building material, it filters our water, takes up heavy metals, and one of the most important things, it can sequester carbon. With all this degradation we've done, we now emit more carbon than we put in. And when you are doing these wonderful practices, integrating cover crops, affecting your different intercropping, bringing integrated pest management, all of these different things we talk about in soils classes or any sort of agricultural realm, you're able to help combat some of these issues and reduce your needs for insecticides, fertilizers, pesticides, all these extra inputs. But you're also helping sequester carbon, build organic matter, and help soils in a way that are necessary. And, I don't want my children or my grandchildren to worry about having access to food. Regardless of their status quo, everyone should have equal access to healthy food. So just the way this diagram goes in circles, we all do as well. We all are interconnected and we all cycle, right? And it's this process of all these different interconnections that we have that make things so wonderful. So when you have healthy soil, you're disturbing less. You don't need to till as much. You're using residue from your crops to help reduce the need for extra moisture, reducing the amount of evapotranspiration, increasing nutrients staying in the soil, and all these wonderful things. When you do that, you're building up your organic matter. Organic matter is amazing. That's where you have all these wonderful life forms. We have our actinomycetes and all of our other microbes, and we have fungi and earthworms and all these great things, creating pathways, transforming nutrients, and creating lands that we can utilize without having to put as much inputs as we do right now. With our current agricultural system, we're so intense, and we just think, all right, conventional ag, we've made this revolution, I am man, I can do whatever I want in this area. But I don't think that's right. And I think we need to pay attention not just what we want, but what the soil needs as well. And so when you follow this, building organic matter, you're sequestering more carbon, as I talked about, and you're helping buffer climate change. When you have healthier soils, they're a little bit more resilient. They can take maybe that few degrees centigrade we're talking about. We've already seen about, 1.3 degrees Celsius, it's already changed. We're not going back from that. And it's only going to get worse if we don't take action. And it probably will still continue, but there's things we can do and make choices as consumers. And so building that up is so crucial. And creating that buffer, right? Soils sequester more carbon, aside from oceans, of course, than any other mass on land. How amazing is that? By changing our practices, you're able to combat one of the most detrimental things we talk about on a daily basis. So, let's dig a little deeper, right? And we talk about these things, and a lot of times when we talk about climate change and food, we talk about organic. And I, for one, I love organics, but sometimes that's not always an option. 70% of our lands are dry land, and although some of those areas have access to water and irrigation, that's not the case for others. A lot of farming is dry land, and so one way we need to think about these issues is we need to adapt, and we need to look at what we can do with the areas we're in. And so I do research at New Mexico State University focusing on soil health, but I also focus on this other aspect of soil variability. So, as we talked about, right, it's this wonderful realm of interactions, and as you can imagine, from one place to the next can be completely different. Different nutrients, different amounts of water, different amounts of sand, silt, and clay, which means so much more with that. And so why should we take our hundreds of acres of land, treat it all the same? We apply the same amount of nutrients, fertilizer, water, all the sides, right? Insecticide, pesticide, herbicide, all of them. But with that, I mean, is that really the right thing to do? In the US, right about the Gulf of Mexico, we're experiencing some crazy issues. There's this thing called eutrophication. With all this agricultural runoff happening, we have dead zones in the ocean. Complete dead zones. How can we have such large masses of water? No life can be there except for the algae growing, because we input so much extra fertilizers into our land that all of that is running off into the water. And with that extra nutrients, there's algae in there, and they're like, oh, yes, look at wonderful nutrients, just like we need. But when they're doing that, they're taking the oxygen in the water. And when they take the oxygen, nothing can live there. No aquatic plants, no fish. I mean, how many of us eat fish and rely on fish, right? A lot. And if we're able to adjust to our lands and think about what it means, maybe this area, it's got a lot of nitrogen. It's got a lot of clay, so it can hold on to those nutrients. Maybe over here, it's a little bit sandier. So we need to think about the way we apply things. And when you're doing that, you're applying things where they're needed and not just where we think they're needed. And as we know, technology is advancing, right? I mean, 5-year-olds have cell phones. They know how to work it better than the rest of us. And we're in this coming of age in technology where you can do anything you want at the click of a button. Well, a lot of the equipment we use has that capability. You can use GPS systems, drones, satellites, and you can look at different amounts of water, nutrients, and different things within the soil. And with a click of a button, you're able to adjust to what you need. And if you have that knowledge or that capability, you're able to help with soils in areas that you wouldn't think possible. To where organics may be a little difficult. When you're doing dryland farming, it's tough to integrate cover crops and all these other other mitigation points. So I think we need to think broader than just organics. I love organics for one, but we need to look at what else you can do, because that's not available in many places. So, along with that, some takeaway points, right? What can we do as humans, as people, as consumers, living on this earth? 1, eat local and organic, of course, if possible. When you're eating local, if that's an option for you, you're able to communicate with your farmers. A lot of places now have CSA boxes where you can get food directly from a farm. When you get your vegetables from Walmart or whatever store, how far are your apples traveling, right? And when you're making those conscious decisions, you're reducing energy, transportation, and different amounts of costs that come with that, not just to pocketbooks, but environmentally as well. Because often we don't take that into consideration. Especially in the US, we think, oh, organics, that's expensive. Our food is cheaper than the majority of the rest of the world. That's crazy to me, right? Some places are paying almost 50% of their incomes just to get food. And for us, in the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. And so we need to consider, when we are consuming things and using our money, where do we want that money to go to? What do we want to support? And another very big portion of it is voting, right? I mean, we can make conscious decisions as consumers, but when we vote for policymakers, we should vote with the environment in mind. We want them to talk about it, but also walk about it and work on the things that they say. And when you're voting for those policies, you can make a difference in a larger way, right? Because often we can say, oh, you should do this, you should do that. But unless there's someone there telling them, it probably won't happen. Another, and I think one of the most important, take your shoes off. Feel the mud in your toes and get that childlike feeling that we put into that box. And share it with everyone else around you. Because when you love the earth and other people love the earth, I think it makes it a lot easier to want to protect it and harness that love, not just for each other or your communities, but for everyone else. So I have a little quote I want to read for you guys. It's Wendell Berry. He's a very famous environmentalist, and he's written a lot of great books, but I love this quote. And it says, "The soil is the greatest connector of lives, the source and destination of all. It is the healer, restorer, and resurrector, by which disease passes into health, age into youth, and death into life. Without proper care for it, we can have no community. Because without proper care, we can have no life. Thank you. I guess if you guys want to ask questions, you can. Yes.
I have a question. So with the microbiology behind soil health, is it feasible to introduce new microflora to a soil to give it a boost of health?
I would say that maybe you could, but in terms of microbiology, a lot of the research we do, we don't know a lot about it. It's almost this emerging field. And a lot of the things we describe and know, it's just because we're able to culture it, we're able to work with it. But there's so much that we don't know about. Maybe you can observe it in the field, but aside from that, you can't do much. And so maybe, but I think there's already so much there that, I mean, billions and billions of microorganisms. And so I don't know if necessarily introducing more would help a lot because there's already so much. And we don't even really know about what's there. If that answers your question.
I can answer your question that there are techniques that we can culture unculturable, so can answer it. So with that, those things like biodiversity, we are learning on that, and we know as microbiologists, we know only the 1% of the diversity we can culture. We really don't know how many types of species are there. Every day, every microbiologist is finding something, but it might result in the same species from some other place. But we are not able to culture them. So still we have some biotechnology techniques with which we are trying to even come up with soil health in this area. But as she told, we are coming up with the apps wherein we know the soil content, the phosphorus and the nitrogen content, and then we can tell farmers not to put those fertilizer there. Those apps are out now. So those are the things we are really working. In India also, people are working with this.
We can do things too, like less till, and that increases kind of the fungal hyphae and everything, the microbiology that actually facilitates nutrient.
Yeah, rhizobium we are using a lot. We are using some of the microbes specifically. Phosphate enablers we are using. We are using microflora. But your question was that we can put it into the dry soil directly. That is not yet feasible.
Okay.
Maybe someday.
I just like synonymous. We to boost our microflora, we take a probiotic supplement or whatever, to introduce the lactobacillus or whatever. And so I was just curious if that's also an option for soil
These
health.
are there. Rhizobium and other phosphate and enablers we are using like same what we are using as probiotics. We are putting it. We call it as biofertilizers. We are using those microbes. But in the soils which have some things, but not in the dry soil yet. I don't think so. I have not
You can use compost as an
composting is being used.
And I think a lot of it is it's all there, but when we are disturbing the soil, tilling, doing these things, fungal hyphae is so important. It's a lot smaller than plant roots, and around plant roots it's like the zone of depletion of phosphorus, and so it's really difficult for plants to get that. And so when you have that fungal hyphae, they're able to get that, and they have such a symbiotic relationship with plants, and not one is overtaking the other. They're getting sugars from the plants, and in return, the plants are getting nutrients, water, phosphorus, and all these other things. But when you're tilling and disturbing the soil, they're not able to be there because you're disrupting it. And so you'll see a lot more bacterial populations, which are good, but you really want those long-term fungal populations because with that, it helps aggregate soil and help soil structure, which is really important for water movement and holding of nutrients, lots of things.
And then I have another question that I'm sure is a really stupid question for a soil scientist, but can you turn dirt into soil?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Definitely. And I think, with that little diagram, just reducing your disturbance and looking at what the soil needs and being conservative with the way you're applying your water. So like in New Mexico, we love to flood irrigate. We flood irrigate everything.
Yeah.
But with that, there's a lot of issues with salts. Because as the water evaporates, it's leaving salts behind. So it's thinking smartly for the areas you're in and building those residues and creating that organic matter. And it takes time, of course, but it'll happen. So you're able to do it. You just need to pay attention to what you're doing and where you're doing it. Yes.
Nikala, first of all, really very good, entertaining presentation. Soils, people say, okay, let me go to sleep now. But you really
Actually, a few
in such
people
a
were
way that
sleeping.
nobody fell asleep. So how, everybody knows this science magazine. One of the, if you can publish a paper in science, it's considered a huge achievement. Number one magazine in terms of the research articles published. 10 years ago, you might know that 10 years ago on the front page of Science, what did they write when they quoted the final frontier? What is the final frontier? And the Science magazine declared soils as the final frontier.
Yeah.
That we think we know, but we really do not know enough about it. Not the black holes, not the universe, it's the soils.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
very
really
rightly
said.
said.
And another thing that surprised me was that when you get the first shower, that it is the earthy smell.
Mhm.
Microbes, I didn't know that. I
Isn't
thought
it
it's a
crazy?
parched soil, when it gets the first shower,
Mhm.
and that is the smell I always like to inhale and enjoy. But I wonder
I
I'm
wanna,
going to do
like,
that
wear
now
this perfume.
because it comes from microbes. I don't know whether I'll be able to
So
enjoy it as much.
In terms of that, when you
Don't
think of
worry,
that,
those microbes are helping us. So don't worry.
No, but still,
all microbes are not.
all the association was with that earthy thing, that parched soil when it gets the first shower.
Yeah.
That smell it emanates is that, and one really loved it.
to
I wonder.
make you comfortable, you have a lot of good microflora in your stomach, and you are surviving. So don't worry about that microbe smell. It will be helping you
how
only.
do these microbes get activated with that? How does it form?
they basically harness carbon and different elements in the soil, and so what they're giving off, so like excrements basically, is what's creating that. And so when you have that really dark, so usually we associate darker soils with more healthy.
Yeah.
If you think about playing in a sandbox versus playing in that dark soil, you're going to get a lot more of that earthy smell because you have a lot more of that life in there. Yeah.
Organic matter.
Oh, you're so sweet.
Just push the nausea down.
She is looking as my
Thank you.